Welcome, everyone,
to another week of Case Files with Kat
and Ashley.
Yeah, and it's like it's the holiday season.
Yeah, I got gifted this duck. You'll see pictures. I'm so excited about it. I can't.
Y'all, she collects rubber ducks.
Yeah, and she painted me this awesome Jason duck. It's amazing.
It's pottery. It's not a rubber duck, but it looks like a rubber duck. That's it.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Oh, so for my birthday, Kat got me a bunch of beers, and this one is Seasick Crocodile.
Yes.
And it's from Prairie, which is usually really great brewery. Like, I've loved everything from them.
I mean, yeah.
But this one, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little nervous.
Oh, my God.
But it's a sour ale with cranberries, ginger, cinnamon, and nutmeg. It sounds like Christmas in a can, but I'm very nervous. Anyways, but for one, I love the can art. It looks like a ugly Christmas sweater.
It does.
And it's amazing. It's so good. I mean, like, just the look of it. Anyways, what are you drinking?
I love it. The Seasick Crocodile. I'm.
Oh my gosh.
This was my beer. Not that one. It's the Shiner Tex-Hex Brewhaus Brew. You know, the old one of the old standbys that enters this house. This was Jason's beer that he was about to walk out of the. So good. He was taking the kids to Five Below to do their Christmas shopping for their friends, you know?
Yeah.
And he was about to walk out of the house with this in his hand to go drive the kids. And I was like,
hey.
You have a beer in your hand. He's like, I sure do.
This sour ale
is it
so
sour?
Good. It's
look,
it's
you made my jaw clench.
Okay, if you drink sour ales, this is not too sour. It's not like super tart. I was thinking with the cranberries it was going to be, but I think the ginger kind of like brings it down a little bit. I don't know how to describe what this it tastes like Christmas. Nice. I don't know how else
I'll smell it.
Yeah, it smells good to me. I can't put my finger on what it reminds me that it tastes like.
Smells like a gingerbread cookie.
Oh, maybe that's it. I don't know. It's really good though.
Oh,
right? Doesn't it?
It's like that hot apple cider.
Yes, that's what
it tastes like. It tastes just like that.
It tastes like apple cider, like warm apple cider.
Yeah, hot apple cider with a little bit of vodka, no, whatever they put in there. Like it's got a kick,
rum, bourbon,
like a rum or bourbon. Yeah,
I don't know, but it's good.
Yeah, it tastes just like that. That's actually not bad.
It's good.
That's actually really not bad.
It's a way better. I'm halfway done with it. We just started.
You're left with apple. Apple and cinnamon.
Yeah, I was trying to think, and that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Apple cider.
Mm-hmm. Tastes just like it. Just like it. Wow, that's amazing what all those flavors do. Wow, cool. I'm glad you like it.
I love it. Mm-hmm. So I apologize in advance, guys. My throat, these allergies are killing me. So my throat's just been real dry, so I'll probably cough a million times. I've got my water. I've got my beer.
This bitch came over here with COVID.
I don't have COVID. I promise I don't have COVID. Swear to God, I don't have COVID. If you get COVID, it wasn't from me. I'll probably get it, and then everyone will assume it was me, but it wasn't me.
Just my
allergies.
The petri dish that are my kids. That's what this is. All right, what you got?
Okay. Well, I'm researching so many cases that people have suggested to us. And I go down these rabbit holes and find other cases, and then I'm just sucked in. So this is not a case that someone recommended to me, though I am working on those. This is a really, really bizarre murder case.
Murder, you say?
Murder, yes.
Ashley's doing a murder.
I know.
Yeah. Always coming in late. Kevin. There it is. All right.
So, early on the afternoon of January 2nd, 1935, a man named Artemus Ogletree walked into the Hotel President, which is a hotel, in what is now located in the Power and Light District of Kansas City, Missouri, and asked for an interior room several floors up. He gave his name, though, as Ronald T. Owen, with an LA address. So they did not know him as Artemus. Okay. No one knows he's Artemus. He is going by Ronald T. Owen.
No one's named Artemis anymore. Great name.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, back then, that's 1935.
Yeah.
So throughout this story, I might say Artemis, I might say Ronald. Most things refer to him as Ronald, but it's the same person. It's just in this situation, no one knows him as Artemis.
Okay.
Everyone knows him as Ronald. So the staff recalled that he was dressed well and wearing a dark overcoat and had no baggage or luggage with him. He had only paid for one night. And the staff noted that in addition to this visible scar that he had on his temple, he had cauliflower ears. And so they thought maybe he was a boxer or some kind of professional wrestler. They believed him to be in his early 20s, but they really weren't sure.
They didn't know him. They just only knew him as Ronald because that's how he introduced himself that night.
Right. I guess
okay.
They didn't ask for IDs back then.
Yeah. They didn't. Yeah. I'm just trying to. Did anybody know him?
Nobody
before?
Knew him.
Okay.
Again, they thought he might be in his 20s. He looked too young.
Okay.
They described him as white with dark hair and mentioned that none of his features were really significant. He was, and I quote, pretty physically unremarkable.
Except for the cauliflower ears. Okay.
Which I just thought was unusual because usually in murder cases, they're like, oh, he was so handsome, or she lit up the room. And in this one, they're like, yeah, he was pretty unremarkable. I was like, wow.
Mediocre match. Okay, go ahead.
Randolph Prost was a bellhop, and he accompanied Ronald, or Artemis, up in the elevator to the 10th floor. On the way, Ronald told him, the bellhop, that he had spent the previous night at a nearby hotel, but found that the $5, which in today's time would be $100, nightly rate was just too high. The bellhop opened room 1046, which per the guest request was on the inside, overlooking the hotel's courtyard rather than the street outside view. He watched as Ronald took a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste out of his pocket, like out of his coat pocket, and that was the extent of his unpacking. He had no bags, no luggage. He just had this comb, hairbrush, and toothpaste. I'm assuming a toothbrush. They never listed a toothbrush, but they said toothpaste out of his coat pocket. So after Ronald put these items over at the sink, he and Randolph left the room. The bellboy returned to lock it and gave Ronald the key. After returning to the lobby, he claimed he saw Ronald leave the hotel. Staff wasn't really sure which direction he was going. He hadn't said anything. They did not see him come back to the hotel, but however, he had to have come back shortly after because things were happening and so he obviously returned. I'll talk more about what was happening, but anyways, that afternoon, Mary Soptic, which is one of the hotel maids, had returned from the day off to the afternoon shift. She went to room 1046, which is where Ronald was, and was surprised to find him there because the previous night there had been a woman in the room. So she apologized, for just coming in. Like, she was just there to clean the room, but she had thought it was the same woman. She apologized, but he said she could go ahead and clean the room. So while she did this, she noticed that he had the shades drawn and left only one dim lamp on. And this would remain the case when she encountered Ronald in the room on other occasions during his stay. He was either worried about something or afraid, in addition to the preference for low light, she told the police. After she had been cleaning for a few minutes, Ronald put his overcoat on, brushed his hair, and then left the room, but asked her to leave the room unlocked when she was done because he was expecting some friends over in a few minutes. She would later say that the circumstances of this encounter made the entire ordeal very unsettling to her. Because basically every time she was in the room, he was just sitting in the dark with one dim lit lamp on, the shades drawn shut, and just sitting there. So anyways, at this point, Ronald leaves the hotel again. But mind you, he's just told the maid he's waiting on friends to come back to his room. So once again, it's unknown where he was going. Mary did as he asked, and at 4 p.m., she returned to the room with freshly laundered towels. Inside the room, it was dark, and she saw Ronald lying on the bed, fully dressed, visible in the light from the hallway, and there was a note on his bedside table that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes, period. Wait, period." At this point, Mary and the other hotel staff, he didn't speak to her when she brought these towels. He was alive. She was just laying there, fully clothed, on his bed with this note that said, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes, period. Wait, period." So at this point, she and the other hotel guests began to whisper about their new strange guest, theorizing that maybe he was a drunk. Alcohol seemed to them to be the only thing to explain his very strange behavior. But little did they know that this behavior was only a precursor for the weirdness that was to follow, because boy, does it get fucking weird.
Does this hotel still exist?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. The following morning, at around 10:30 a.m. on Thursday, January 3rd, 1935.
I drank your beer and you're sick. God,
I'm
dog
not
it.
sick. I promise you, I'm not sick.
Okay, go.
It's my allergies.
Sorry, I just realized.
Oh my God, I'm not sick. You're not gonna die.
I'm dying. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
The following morning at around 10:30 on Thursday, January 3rd, 1935, Mary, the maid, returned to clean the room. The door was locked from the outside.
It's been one day now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indicating that the new hotel guest had stepped out. However, after unlocking the door with her passkey and stepping inside, Mary was surprised to find Ronald sitting inside, again, in the dark, just as he had been the day before, with the shades drawn and the dim table lamp on. She didn't know why the door had been locked from the outside, but Mary said later in her statement, said she didn't want to know. She was just like, whatever. She was just weirded out at this point, right? So her statement, the next day, she was talking to the police about the events that are coming. And her statement said, at 10:30 a.m. on Thursday, I went to the room and unlocked it, believing that the guest was away. I walked in and found this man sitting there with the lights off and the shades drawn. I realized after I unlocked this door that the man had been locked in from the outside. While in the room, I heard a conversation that Ronald was having over the telephone. He was saying, "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." That was the extent of the conversation. Mary went about her business inside the room, cleaning it and striking up a very brief conversation with Ronald, who sat in the dark and asked her about her job. He asked Mary if she was responsible for cleaning the entire floor, and again voiced his complaints about the nearby hotel that he had stayed at and said was too expensive. He said, he was saying that basically he just was complaining about the prices to her, just like he had to the bellhop, and she didn't understand why, right? She was just like, okay. So she quickly finished cleaning the room and left because she was just very uncomfortable, right? He's just sitting in the dark, kind of in the corner, asking her all these questions about her job, complaining about this other hotel, just very strange. She would return again at around 4 p.m. with some fresh towels. But as she approached the door, she could hear two men inside talking. One voice was that of Ronald, the house guest, of course. And then the other voice was a deeper, louder, and bit more gruff. She was not able to make out what they were saying, but interrupted their conversation with a brief knock. The man with the deeper voice asked who it was, and when she had told them she brought fresh towels, the man with the deeper voice replied, "No, we don't need any. We've got enough." Which Mary found this extremely odd because she had taken away all of the towels which had been dirtier earlier in the day when she was cleaning it, so she knew there were no towels inside. Yet, as that may be, she really didn't care because that room was just making her uncomfortable to begin with, so she just moved on to the next room. She wasn't going to fight them about towels. So on the night of January 3rd, which is Thursday, At around 11 p.m., a water department employee named Robert Lane was flagged down in the street not far from the hotel president by at this time, unknown male to him. The man Lane picked up was hurt. He had a bad scrape on his arm, and Lane suspected he may have had some more serious injuries. He was just in his shirtless, he was just in his shirt, which had no sleeves, and despite it being a January night in the middle of Kansas City, which would be freezing, he had no coat. So he said to the gentleman, "You look as though you've been in it bad. Like you look bad." And when the man asked him if he would take him to find a cab, he said, "Sure." And then this man looked at the employee, Robert Lane, and said, "I'll kill that blank tomorrow." Now, every newspaper article I found bleeped that word out. I don't know what he said. "I'll kill someone tomorrow. I'll kill that fucker tomorrow." Whatever. But that's all he said to this person in the car. So after a couple of blocks, Robert let the man out, and the man thanked him before climbing out and hailing down another taxi. So Robert Lane was just like a city worker, basically. And this man flagged him down. He was injured, bleeding, whatever, cupping his arm to hold blood in. Like the guy said, he was like trying to keep pressure on his arm to keep the blood in. Why he didn't take him to a hospital or a police station, I don't know. He just took him somewhere so he could get an actual taxi. Later, Robert Lane would identify this strange man as the hotel president's guest, Ronald T. Owen. Yet, what circumstances may have led to the strange encounter remain unknown to this day. So he's still alive at this point, but he was running around the streets of Kansas City in the freezing cold January weather, no coat, just a sleeveless shirt, bleeding from all these places, telling this man he's going to kill someone tomorrow, and just gets dropped off, gets a taxi, and goes on about his day. That evening, guests on the 10th floor, which is the floor that Ronald is staying on, would report loud noises, which were not isolated to any one room, yet painted a rather chaotic picture. In addition to a party going on in room 1055, which is the one, next door or whatever, there were constant trips up to the 10th floor through the elevator with men and women coming and going from various rooms, talking loudly. Elevator operator Charles Blotter, who began his shift at midnight, later would tell authorities that he was busy until roughly 1:30 a.m. Many of the residents seemed to be going to their rooms or to the party in room 1055, but he did recall a couple of residents that came up in those early morning hours that struck him as odd. One was a woman he'd seen a few times before, who he believed to be a sex worker. The other was a man that later accompanied her, who he had never seen before. And in his statement to the police, he said, "I took a woman that I recognized as being a woman who frequents the hotel with different men in different rooms. It is my impression from this woman's actions that she is a commercial woman," which I thought was an interesting way to say sex worker.
She owns her own business. Yep. Okay.
But he said she is a commercial woman. I took her to the 10th floor, and she made inquiries for room 1026. About 5 minutes after this, 1026. Okay. No, she may admit 1046, but he says 1026. Okay. After 5 minutes after this, I received a signal to come back to the 10th floor. Upon arriving there, I met the same woman, and she wondered why he wasn't in his room because he had called her and had always been very prompt in his appointments, and she wondered if he might be in room 224. He never said who she was referring to, just that she had met this particular man multiple times in his room. Anyways, she remained about 30 or 40 minutes, and I received a signal to go back to the 10th floor. I went back, and the same woman appeared there and came down on the elevator with me and left the elevator at the lobby. About an hour later, she returned in company with a man, and I took them to the 9th floor. I later received a signal to go to the 9th floor at about 4:15 a.m. with the same woman came down from the 9th floor and left the hotel. In a period of about 15 minutes later, this man came down the elevator from the 9th floor complaining that he couldn't sleep and was going out for a walk. The elevator operator, Charles, would describe this man and woman he'd seen that night as both standing about 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing 135 pounds. The man wore a light brown overcoat and had with a brown hat and shoes. The woman wore a coat of black Hudson seal or imitation Hudson seal, which I thought was a very specific seal fur, but okay. Anyways, per his statement, this was a woman he'd seen around the hotel beforehand, but the man was new to him, so he had never seen this particular man that she was with, that they were supposedly on the 9th floor. He would go on to describe a few others leaving the hotel around the same time, after 4 a.m. Among them was a pair of middle-aged women. Another was a man carrying a Gladstone bag, who left between 5 and 6 a.m. If you don't know what a Gladstone bag is, that was like those old-timey suitcases that you see in movies with the doctors. They would carry it around, and they would have like medical equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
in TV shows and stuff. So he saw a man leave with one of those between 5 and 6.
When the doctor makes the house call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. A woman there's so much information to this story. I'm sorry, guys. A woman that was staying in the room next to room 1046. Now, this is the room that Ronald was supposed to be staying in. Would later report hearing laughing and talking in Ronald's room just after midnight. When speaking to police, this woman would state that she heard what sounded like two couples, 2 men and 2 women, laughing and talking until roughly 2 a.m. However, at this point, it seems like something happened and that conversation between them turned sour, with the guests in the room beginning to use abusive language towards each other between 2 and 3. She recalled the time because she'd actually started to call down to the front desk to complain about the noise, but decided not to at the last second. This would later be notable because the woman recalled hearing what sounded like loud snoring at around 4 a.m. That's something you should remember, that time, 4 a.m. She supposedly heard snoring on January 3rd.
4th.
Well, technically, yes, the 4th.
Okay.
Yeah. So at around 7 a.m. that morning on Friday, January 4th, the hotel switchboard operator, Della Ferguson, came on shift. She was prepared to make a requested wake-up call to room 1046, but noticed the light was on, indicating that the room's phone was off the hook. As such, she could not call it. She picked up the plug and repeatedly tried to say good morning, hoping that the guest had preemptively picked up the phone, but there was no response from the other end of the line, just silence. From here, it fell upon staff workers to try and wake him up. So she had called one of the bellhops, and she had said, "Can you please go up to 1046? I'm supposed to do this wake-up call. Their phone's been off the hook for hours." I don't know how she knew that it was hours, but maybe someone had the shift before her had said it was off. But she was like, basically, can you just go see what's going on? So the bellhop, which is Randolph, the one that had originally taken him to the room, goes up to the room. He would go up there noticing a do not disturb sign placed on the door, but he did so anyways because the man had specifically requested a wake-up call. And in his statement to the police, he would later recall, about 7:05 Friday morning, the switchboard operator informed me that the receiver was off the hook in Owen's room. I found the door locked, knocked several times, and then heard a deep voice say, "Come in." The door was still locked, so I knocked again, and the same voice said, "Turn on the lights." I knocked some more, then told the man to put the telephone receiver on the hook. I returned to the hotel lobby and told the operator the man in 1046 apparently was drunk and for her to wait an hour or so and send someone up to try and get the receiver put on the hook. So when he was knocking on this door, a voice said, "Come in." He kept knocking, and then he heard a voice that said, "Turn on the lights." He did not go in. They have keys to go in, but they did not go in. He just went back down and said, "Hey, man, I don't know. He seems drunk. Try again in an hour," basically. I'm sure it's one of those things where it's like, not my job. You know what I mean? Like, I assume I also probably wouldn't go into a room if I heard someone say, come in, turn on the light, like, and weird shit had been happening, I would probably not do it either. Like, I'm not getting paid enough. You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. Like I'm like, oh, he's probably, they've all been talking about the guy in 1046. Like,
You wanted a wake up call. You're obviously awake. I'm
like,
out.
yeah. Hey, put your phone on. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
I've done my duty.
I'm absolutely not blaming him for not going in. I'm just pointing out that he could have gone in, but he didn't.
Yeah.
So we don't know who was in the room. Just someone was saying, come in, turn on the lights.
No. Housekeeping.
At around 8:30, the switchboard operator noticed that the phone from room 1046 was still off the receiver. Ooh. So that they were unable to make contact with the guest. So another bellhop, this time it was a man named Harold Pike, was sent up to check on the guest. When Harold arrived at the room, he noticed the same do not disturb sign and said it was still hung on the door. And as Randolph had done, the door he knocked, the door was locked, surprisingly from the outside. So again, this kind of means, like, when the door was locked from the outside, it meant that the guest had left the room and locked it. I don't know how they could tell the difference between the guest locking it from the inside and locking it from the outside, but there was apparently a difference. But Harold used his key to unlock the door and step inside. Ooh. He found the room dark, and again the shades were drawn and the lights were off. With the faint light coming in from the hallway, Harold could see that the room's occupant, Ronald Owen, was laying naked on the bed, facing the wall away from him. He recalled seeing some dark spots on the bedding, but thought little of it at the time. Believing that the man was drunk, he reached toward the phone, which was laying on the floor, and put it back on the stand before stepping out and leaving the room. He did not check on Ronald. He just assumed he was drunk. He didn't ask what the dark spots were on the bed. Just picked up the phone, put it on the receiver, and left the room. A little over 2 hours later, the same phone board operator noticed that the receiver in room 1046 was once again off the hook.
Shut up.
Blocking any potential phone calls.
Shut up. Oh my God.
So bellhop Randolph found himself called to the room once again for the second time that morning. This would be the third time someone's gone up there.
Yes.
So this time he brought with him the passkey, allowing him to unlock the doors that had been locked from the outside. He told the police, at 11 o'clock, the operator told me to go back to 1046 and to tell the man to put his receiver on the hook.
Oh my God.
I knocked loudly 3 times and got no response. I then used the pass key, and when I entered the room, the man was within 2 feet of the door.
Shut up.
On his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed blood on his head. I turned the lights on, placed the receiver on the hook, as if that was like the most fucking important thing at the time.
Yes. I mean,
he placed the receiver on the hook and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. Ronald was nude and visibly injured. He was bent down on all fours. His head hung low, revealing he had suffered a violent assault of some kind. Randolph turned on the lights, illuminating what was a very chaotic and very bloody scene. A nearby chair was overturned. The bedding was in disarray, half on and half off the bed. It, like the walls and even the ceiling, were stained with streaks of blood. So I'd like to remind you that the other bellhop had been there that morning and didn't notice any of that when he went in and put the phone on the receiver.
It was a dark room, though, right? I mean,
yeah, but I mean, can you just like blood on the ceiling, everywhere? So you would think he would have noticed some blood somewhere. Maybe not. I don't know.
I bet he was just like, I don't fucking want to see this naked man. He's, know.
Yeah. So seeing this, Randolph then turned around to try and seek help. And in his statement to the police, he recalled, "This frightened me. I left the room immediately and informed Mr. Weaver, assistant manager of the hotel. He and the manager and myself returned to the room and opened the door about 6 inches. The man was against the door now, and we could not open it further. So we closed it and left. And shortly after this, I saw a doctor and the police there." By the time, so basically this man was trying to crawl to the door to get out of his room because he was far away enough from the door for them to open it. He's alive at this time. Just mind you, like, it's not like the bellhops are stepping over a dead man. He's alive. They're just not, like, they're just leaving the room and trying to get help. Anyways, by the time the hotel staff came back up to the room, the injured man inside had wedged himself against the door, struggling to maintain his own consciousness. Minutes later, police arrived, joined by Dr. Harold Flanders of Kansas City General Hospital. They were able to get the injured guest away from the door, gaining access to the bizarre scene that lay on the other side of it. Having gained control of himself momentarily, Ronald stood, still nude and bloody, walking over to the bathroom. There he sat on the edge of the bathtub, leaning over the washbowl, where he tried to drink water from the faucet. Here, police and Dr. Flanders noted that the man had been bound, with the white cord still wrapped around his neck, wrist, and ankles. Dr. Flanders would cut the bindings, noting additional bruising around his neck, where someone had evidently tried to strangle the man. A brief scan of Ronald's body would reveal stab wounds to his chest, including one that pierced the region just north of his heart. Another stab had punctured one of the man's lungs. He had also suffered multiple blows to the head, resulting in a severe skull fracture. While Dr. Flanders attempted to treat the young man, cutting away the bindings, trying to stop the bleeding, one of the police detectives, Ira Johnson, began asking him questions. In his dazed state, Ronald was unable to answer very much, struggling to find words. I mean, goddamn. Like, his lung was stabbed. He was stabbed in the chest, skull fracture. Like, I'm surprised he was awake, honestly. But she said, "Who was here with you?" He responded, "Nobody." She said, "How did you get hurt?" "I fell against the bathtub." She said, "Did you try to commit suicide?" "No." Shortly thereafter, Ronald would lose all consciousness and would never regain it. Having been rushed to a nearby hospital, the young man would become comatose. He'd remain in that state for a dozen hours or so, succumbing to his injuries shortly after midnight on January 5th, 1935.
Wow. Okay. Before you go to the theories, what do you think happened?
I know what happened.
Oh, there's an answer? You said it was unsolved.
Well, okay. There were some...
It's solved, but they didn't catch the person?
There's some weird shit that happens.
Okay.
Where people are like, obviously, that's what happened. But then they're like, but did that happen?
Yeah,
or are they just like weirdos? Or like, I don't know. He says there was no one else in the room. So, I mean, that seems like real extreme to do to yourself. Give yourself a skull fracture, stab yourself in the heart and lungs.
But how did somebody lock him in?
He was locked in once before when the maid came.
And who the fuck is Dawn? All right, tell the story. Okay, go.
I'm glad you remembered Dawn. Dawn is an important factor in the story.
Well, yeah. Okay, go.
So, the guest who had told the hotel his name was Ronald T. Owen had been bound before his death, been stabbed multiple times. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. The young man's death certificate was signed by County Coroner Dr. P.H. Owen, who bore no relation to Ronald T. Owen. For reasons that we'll explore, he ruled the death as a murder, like not suicide. Well, because that was the detectives was like, well, did you try to kill yourself? But then they noticed all these other things, and they just was like, no way. Okay, so the guest who told the hotel that his name was Ronald T. Owen had been bound. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest. His lungs, his wrists were slashed. There were several bruises on the right side of his head. His skull had been fractured. He suffered a significant cut to his right ear. His hands were bruised, indicating that he'd been in a fight before his death. And by all indications, he had been tortured and suffered his injuries roughly 6 to 7 hours before he was found in his room. Based on the amount of dry blood found on him at the time of his discovery, they put the rough estimate of the attack at sometime between 4 and 5 a.m., meaning all of these times that these people in the hallway were partying, that the bellhop was going up and down, or the elevator was going up and down, the bellhops that had got into his room, he was injured the whole time. Supposedly they didn't notice it at any of the times they went in. As investigators looked through the young man's hotel room, they discovered that virtually none of his belongings were there.
His 3 things?
Yeah. But they couldn't find any of his clothes.
He didn't have clothes, though.
Well, what he was wearing. Like his clothes, like his one set of clothes was gone. None of the regular hotel like things were there. Like the towels were not there. The soap, the things that the hotel provides you, those were all gone. Missing were his hairbrush and toothbrush and toothpaste and comb. Items that the bellhop specifically had seen him take out of his pockets. There was no murder weapon in the room. Police believe that Owen or Ronald had been stabbed by a thin knife, and its absence indicated to them that this was not a suicide. This was not a suicide attempt gone wrong. Though I think the many other injuries would indicate that, but anyways. The missing blade paired with the bindings around his neck, wrists, and ankles indicated something very sinister. As stated by Detective Ira Johnson to the reporters, there's no doubt that someone else is involved in this. Based on multiple witness reports, it is believed that the attack on Ronald had started between 2 and 4 a.m., during which time that loud conversation in his room had begun to turn sour. Mm-hmm. As you remember, the neighbor in the next room heard the abusive language and claimed that she had heard snoring, but the investigators believe that the loud snoring noise she heard at 4 a.m. may have been, in fact, Owen struggling to breathe after getting stabbed in the lungs. Had she called the front desk when she heard the noise when she had originally planned to do, he may have been able to be saved.
Oh, my God. See something, say something. Oh.
Despite being unable to find any of his belongings in the room or a murder weapon, there were a few items the police would begin to focus their investigation on. Among them were a couple of items found on a rug near the bed, which included an unsmoked cigarette, a woman's hairpin, and a necktie label for an item of clothing. The label indicated that the nondescript item of clothing had been made by the Botany Worsted Mills Company in New Jersey. Other items of note in the room included a safety pin and a bottle of sulfuric acid, as well as the pieces of the cord used to bind the victim. Now, that sulfuric acid bottle was completely full. It hadn't been used. There were white cotton wrapping cords described as having the thickness of a thin pencil, similar to those used for clotheslines.
Okay.
The knots used to bind the victim were described as simple and or amateurish, having been triple tied, so it wasn't like a professional knot tire, right?
Well, not a military person, right?
Right.
Not a sailor.
Yeah, not like a serial killer who had done this a million times.
Right.
So after dusting the room for fingerprints, investigators would find female fingerprints on 2 items and unbroken glass in the bathroom, as well on the telephone stand, which had been left off the hook following the attack. After ruling his death a homicide, authorities began making plans to lay him to rest. However, as they tried to locate his next of kin, they ran into a problem that ran beyond a simple investigation. Try as they might, authorities could not locate any of the descendants' family members or friends. As far as they could tell, Ronald Owen was not even his real name. As days turned into weeks, police and other officials struggled to determine the man's real identity. They would broadcast his description in local newspaper articles as a young white male between the ages of 25 and 30. They really had no idea how old he was. And his age was disputed often because the coroner said that he was probably around 20 and the hotel staff put him late 20s. Police thought he was in his 30s. So, really, it was a very vague description, right? We have this dead white man who could be anywhere from 20 to 35. He stood around 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 200 pounds, with brown, bushy hair and blue eyes, as well as a scar on the top of his head, which appeared to have come from an old burn. He combed his hair over the left side of his head to hide it, but the scar was described as being wedge-shaped, roughly 4.5 inches across above the left ear. In noting the bruises on his hands, authorities noted that they were not hands used to labor, yet his cauliflower ear gave the indication that he had been a fighter of some kind. But they thought most likely a wrestler. Mm-hmm. Detective Ira Johnson, a former wrestler himself, noted... Ira Johnson, a former wrestler himself, noted the young man's unusual underarm muscular development, which he'd only ever seen in wrestlers.
Underarm
muscular development.
Interesting. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, which leads me to believe, like, this man was 5'10", 200 pounds, a former wrestler, and someone was able to do all of this to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, you would have to be I would think you'd have to be kind of big.
Okay, but Ashley, did he go there looking for that? Because, I mean...
Did he go there looking to be murdered very brutally? I don't think so. Could just be me, but I don't think that was...
He didn't have any clothes. It didn't seem like he was planning on staying there very long.
So you think he hired someone to murder him?
And then he... Like, that's never happened. I mean, the whole thing just is bizarre.
But this is not even the weirdest part.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, he's
I don't know.
I can't imagine, yes, if he was a fighter and he was so muscular and well built, and he just seemed to hide in the darkness for Dawn, you know.
And it's D-O-N, Dawn, like a male Dawn, not like D-A-W-N, a woman.
Yeah. I figured it was,
Well, I'm just making sure because I did say there were women fingerprints in the room.
Yeah. Weird. Just the whole thing. This whole thing is just bizarre. Okay, go
ahead. These descriptions would lead to multiple people reaching out to the police and even hotel staff claiming to have known the man. One such woman dialed the hotel.
You're burpy with
I
it.
know. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. One woman dialed the hotel president, which is the name of the hotel, hours after the death had first been reported, asking the staff for a description of the man. When they gave it to her, she responded, "That's the man. He used to live in Clinton, Missouri." This woman then hung up, Clinton, Montana. This woman then hung up before she could be asked any questions. I'm sorry, Missouri. It is Missouri. I don't know why I said Montana. I'm just going to back up here.
Back it up.
She called them, asked for the description. They gave it to her. She said, "That's the man. He used to live in Clinton, Missouri." She hangs up. They can't ask her questions. Police would reach out to their counterparts in Clinton, Missouri, and were able to find anyone in that town missing that matched the description of this man that they had. Only one man in the town had the name Ronald Owen, but he was alive and well and surprised to hear that he may have been killed in Kansas City. Just weird coincidence that he happened to live in this town.
Yeah.
And he had the name. So authorities would then do the same for any potential missing people in the LA region because, again, when he checked into the hotel, he gave them an LA address.
Yeah.
And so they looked for anyone with the name Ronald Owen, but were very unsuccessful. Surprisingly, the woman who'd been staying in the room next door to him, who'd reported hearing the loud noises turn into the argument, was named Jean Owen, and she hailed from a nearby town called Lee's Summit and had come into Kansas City to visit her boyfriend and go shopping. She was questioned because of the coincidence of her surname being so similar to the victim's, as was her boyfriend, who was questioned separately from her. Both of their stories matched up with one another, and it was determined that neither had any relation to the dead man. Despite their numerous attempts, officials in Kansas City were unable to identify him, who they could only theorize that he had given them a fake name, that he had given them a fake address. They also didn't know why he had been at the hotel, nor who he'd meet up with during his stay. As they tried to figure out his identity, they also tried to figure out who the mysterious Dawn was. This figure he'd left the note for, spoken to on the telephone. Fingerprints of the descendant were sent to the Department of Justice, but didn't match up with anyone on record. Photos of him were published in newspapers and wire services, as were sketches of what he'd look like alive, in hopes of catching the attention of someone that knew him. However, in the months ahead, nothing would get confirmed. It would take years for them to get a positive ID. Prior to his...
I'm totally listening to you, but look at them. They're being so cute.
Oh, my support kitties.
They're just kissing each other. They're just so sweet.
Precious. They're comforting each other for
I
this
know.
story.
They're like
damn.
this crazy shit. All right, go.
So prior to be identifying, it was decided that he would be buried in a pauper's grave for unclaimed people. Upon the announcement, the Melody McGilly Funeral Home received a phone call from an anonymous man insisting they bury Ronald in Memorial Park Cemetery and offered to pay for the full burial cost. Shortly after, the money arrived rolled up in a newspaper, and then 13 American Beauty roses were sent to his funeral with a note that read, "Love forever, Louise." According to one statement, the caller said, "I'm doing this for my sister," to the florist. That's what the florist claimed, is that whoever ordered those roses said, "I'm doing this for my sister." The note on the roses said, "Love forever, comma, Louise." And the person sent the money for the funeral in a rolled up newspaper to the funeral home. The unknown man,
But it was a man who had made the call
and supposedly paid.
Yeah.
The florist did not say one way or the other, just said that "I'm doing this for my sister." The unknown man who called up to pay for the funeral had explained that Ronald cheated on a girl and that he, the girl, and Ronald had a little meeting in room 1046. Hotel staff did recall seeing a man and a woman coming out of 1046 that morning prior to discovering Roland. They seemed to be in a hurry, which seems odd. You didn't think about mentioning this man and woman to the police until after this random phone call. Like, I think that would be very important information. Anyways, they said that this couple claimed to be in a hurry. Anyways, finally the man on the phone said cheaters always get what's coming to them, and then hung up. And this is a call to the funeral home. When he's calling to pay for the funeral.
Oh, that's a lot of information to get.
I mean, I don't understand why you would say cheaters always get what's coming to them. You offer to pay for the funeral. It was so weird. Okay, so in spring of 1936, a year and a half later, a friend had given Ruby Ogletree the latest issue of American Weekly. The friend said this is something she wanted Ruby to see, and Ruby could not believe her eyes. On a page that detailed Ronald T. Owen's bizarre demise, the face that stared back at her was her son, 19-year-old Artemus Ogletree. She hadn't heard from him in quite some time. He was 19.
Oh my gosh.
Artemus had left his home in Alabama to travel, and Ruby hadn't seen him since. At first, he had handwritten her letters on a regular basis. Sometimes he would wire money home. But as the time went on, the letters slowly dwindled. Here's where it gets really weird because, mind you, he's sending letters home. For the next part to happen, someone would have had to have known where home was. Okay, and he'd given an LA phone or address to the hotel. The mother, explained that to the authority that she had received 3 typed letters from Artemus from 3 different cities in the spring of 1935. He was already dead. She thought it was odd that they were typed because she knew that Artemus didn't know how to use a typewriter. She noticed the letters contained unfamiliar slang that didn't seem like him either. Now Ruby knew it couldn't have been her son. Her son was dead when those letters were sent. How would someone know that he was writing letters home and that they needed to continue to write letters home and knew the address of her home unless whoever killed him knew him on a personal level?
Yeah.
The first letter was in early 1935, postmarked in Chicago, and it aroused her suspicion since it was typewritten, and as far as she knew, he couldn't type. It was also written in a highly, fancy kind of style that was just not consistent with his previous letters.
Mother.
Right.
Mummy dearest.
And in May 1935, another letter supposedly from Artemus said he was going to Europe. It was followed by a special delivery letter saying that his ship was sailing that day. Both were sent from New York. In August of that year, Ruby received a telephone call from Memphis, Tennessee. This phone call is so weird. The man calling her told her that Artemus had saved his life in a fight and that Artemus himself could not call because he was now living in Egypt, where he had married a wealthy woman and was doing well. He was unable to write, the caller said, because he had lost one of his thumbs in the fight where he had saved the caller. Ruby talked to this strange man for half an hour. She recalled that he spoke wildly and irrationally, but seemed to have very first-hand knowledge of Artemus. She gave the police the name the man identified himself by, and this name has never been made public.
Oh.
If Artemus had, at some point before his death, gone to Egypt or anywhere else overseas, he had not done so under his own name. No steamship company at the time had any record that he had traveled with them. The U.S. Embassy in Egypt was unable to find any evidence that he had been there or that he had been married to an Egyptian citizen, specifically a rich one.
Why are they even looking this up? Because he was already dead when all this happened. Okay.
Just, I guess.
Just seeing.
Yeah.
Just seeing.
Just seeing where this goes.
Like, could somebody have stolen his identity
Right.
and done that? I mean.
So information developed through the police's conversations with Ruby helped them establish a third hotel in Kansas City, the St. Regis, where Artemus had stayed.
Hold on. Okay, so the too expensive one, and then this one.
The Hotel President,
Which
is where he died, but he had been in another one called the St. Regis.
Oh, and that's not the expensive one?
No.
The third one?
This is the third one.
Okay.
There he had shared a room with another man. Now, they don't know if that other man had been Don or who the man was. That's another mystery to the case. They don't know who was writing the letters. They don't know who wrote the phone call. They don't know who was in the room with Artemus. Wow. They don't know who was in the room with him at the St. Regis. Identifying Artemus did not give the investigators the clues they needed, and instead of helping, they just had more freaking questions because it's all so bizarre. At any point during his stay or on the morning of January 4th, 1935, Artemus could have gotten help that may have saved his life. The 5th. This is the morning of January 4th. Oh. Mm-hmm. He could have done many things that would have saved his life. He could have said something to the bellhops when they came in. He could have spoken into the phone because it was off the receiver. He could have called. I don't know. They seem to think that he could have done things to save his life. I don't know what he could have done. I mean, he was stabbed, beaten, tortured, bound. I don't know. They claim he could have saved his life.
He said, "Come in."
Yeah.
Turn on the light.
Yeah.
He could have said, "I'm hurt. Get help."
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah.
He could have turned over if he was still alive.
I mean, I don't know what I would do if maybe he was just, he had a skull fracture, right? So who knew, the thought process?
But he was trying to get out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was some self-preservation at the end.
They also didn't understand why, when he was conscious, he told them that no one was in the room, had been in the room with him. Unless, in my mind, I didn't know, maybe he was thinking they meant, was there someone in the room with you now? You know what I mean? I could see, if he was so out of it, but I don't know. They didn't understand why he wouldn't tell them what happened while he was still awake. So they began questioning who would he be protecting, who was he meeting, who took his life. In 1937, the New York City police arrested a man named Joseph Martin on a murder charge after he killed a man who he shared a room with and put the body in a trunk to be shipped to Memphis. Among several aliases, he was found to have used his one alias, Donald Kelso. According to the story about the case, the New Yorker had matched the KCPD had matched samples of his handwriting to those letters that had been written to Ruby.
But they were typed. Oh, well, I guess they had to be addressed. Okay.
No charges were filed against the man for the death of Artemus, and KCPD kept the case open. The files show that different detectives reviewed the case every year, all the way through the 1950s. Each time they noted they would keep the case open and follow up, but no new evidence was ever uncovered.
DNA.
And gradually the case went cold. In 2003, John Horner, a Kansas City Public Library historian, fielded a call from someone out of state. This unnamed person claimed they had been helping to inventory the belongings of a recently deceased elderly person when they found a hidden shoebox. Inside the shoebox were news clippings related to the case and murder of Artemus, and an item mentioned in one of the stories, the item which was never publicly put out, was in the box. For whatever reason, though, John Horner did not make this public, did not call the police, did not ask for any names. Nobody knew about this until he decided in 2012 to retell the story in a 2-part blog piece on the library's online blog. So in 2003, this person calls up, hey, I found all these things, and this man didn't think about asking who the elderly person was, who the caller was, didn't bother to call the police. The hotel present where Ronald was killed still stands today. It is a historic landmark for Kansas City. It is very much still a hotel. This murder remains unsolved, and no clear motive or suspect has ever been identified. That's my story. The only theories about Don that came up was they weren't sure if Don was like, they did investigate if it was like the mafia, like a mafia Don, and then they're like, that's a little ridiculous.
That's a little ridiculous, yeah.
And then they're like, well, was it this man that got arrested with the alias Donald Kelso? But at the same time, they didn't convict him for whatever reason. He went on about his life. He got convicted for that other murder.
Yeah.
They never identified the female fingerprints that were in the room. Never matched to a female. They never figured out who the man that paid for the funeral was, or why he was doing it for his sister, as he claimed. They never determined who Louise was, which was the name signed on the rose card. They don't know why someone kept writing Ruby these letters or how they would know to write her letters.
That's fucked up, though.
Yeah. They don't know who this mysterious man was that called and said Artemus was living in Egypt and lost his thumbs, saving his life. None of these things have ever been solved. That
reminds me of like the Gilgo Beach. Remember, like the guy that called the mom?
Oh, yeah.
She was with me and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So,
why call? That's just so messed up.
But yeah, these things have never been figured out. They don't know the answer to any of these questions.
The call to the librarian.
He was just like, okay, just held on to that information until he wrote about it 9 years later in a blog. These people.
And was there any documentation, or he just got a call?
He just got a call. The person told him, hey, I've been cleaning out this elderly person that passed away's property, and I found a hidden shoebox that had clippings about the murder and some item that was in the box. The police didn't release what the item was because it was an actual item that I guess was linked to the case. And they wanted to make sure that it was.
So the librarian has that.
No. The library did not have it. This person just called about it. I don't know why they called the library. And what they expected.
Keepers of information.
Well, I guess that's true.
And
but that's weird. Like, why would you call the library about just a shoebox that had newspaper articles in it? Unless you were asking the librarian about the news article. Like, what was this about? But the librarian basically did nothing with any of this information. Didn't report it. Didn't write about it. Didn't ask questions.
Was he really a librarian? Because, I mean, librarians are pretty inquisitive. That's kind of their thing, you know.
He
find answers to shit.
All I know is that
that makes me mad. That was in 2006.
2003 is when he got the call. 2012 is when he wrote about it.
God, 9 years later, and then the bellhop saw a man and a woman leave 1046.
Multiple staff saw a man and a woman leave that room at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Even the elevator guy. Remember I told you he took that couple down that was supposedly on the 9th floor? He had seen the woman before but had never seen the man. So that was never answered what they were doing. Why? Originally, she went to the 10th floor.
Right.
Called him back up and said, hey, my date's not in the room. Stayed there for another 30 or 40 minutes. Then came back down and then came back later and went to the 9th floor. And then left shortly after. And then that doctor with the medicine bag left the 10th floor. There was that wild party happening on the 10th floor. All of these things have never been answered. Who did the doctor go see? Who the man that had the doctor bag was there was seeing? Again, why did the person pay for the funeral and demand he be buried in a certain place and say it was, pay like in a rolled up newspaper, and then to explain to the funeral director that Ronald was a cheater and cheaters get what they deserve, and that him and this girl that Artemus cheated on had a little talk. Like, you're basically confessing to the murder and you're paying for the funeral of the person that you murdered. It's so weird. It's also weird. And then this elaborate story of Artemus saving this other man's life and losing his thumb. And
why bother doing that? It's so bizarre. Extra. It's so extra. It's unnecessary.
Why didn't you just say he died in the fight saving your life? Or whatever. I mean, like, to say that he couldn't call his mother from Egypt because he lost his thumbs. Like, that's just
you couldn't dial with other... He couldn't write. They didn't have long distance then.
Well, he specifically told her that Artemus could not contact her, could not call her.
Well, they said he couldn't write because he didn't have thumbs.
Yeah, but he couldn't call or write or contact her. So he was doing it for her.
That's just evil, to keep the man alive for his mom. Or else you feel really guilty, and so you don't want to break her heart.
I mean,
maybe the sister was really the mom. And it was like his uncle or something. Like, I don't know. Why go through so much trouble to keep him alive?
I meant to tell you. So when they were looking for someone to identify Ronald, and they were putting his picture in the newspaper, that hotel that he complained about being so expensive, contacted the police and said that a man matching that description had stayed in the hotel the night before, like January 1st, but he used the name Eugene K. Scott.
Oh. Does that name belong to anybody?
Nope.
That was just the name
police investigated and said no man ever named Eugene K. Scott ever existed at that time. So it is thought that Ronald had checked into that hotel using a fake name, left, went to this hotel, and used a fake name.
What on earth was he up to? to use all these aliases and
So it was thought that he
For
was kind of
19
lying about
-year-old.
why he left the hotel, right? It wasn't because it was expensive. He was obviously,
why?
yeah,
Well, why did he?
no one knows.
Well, what did
But his name, Ronald T. Owen, was a fake. The Eugene K. Scott was a fake.
Yeah. I mean, he was into some shady shit. That's all. I mean, obviously.
They pleaded with the public for a long time for anybody to come forward. Nobody ever came forward. No one gave any kind of idea of what happened, who this couple was, who he could have been fighting with. I mean, and there were so many people coming in and out because of that party that
Oh.
that the staff just couldn't pinpoint. You know what I mean? Like the elevator guy said, that there was a party, so many men and women coming in and out of rooms. So,
Wow. Well, that's a crazy ass story.
yeah. And it's still, to this day,
That is
Unsolved.
perplexing. I know. If we only had DNA, if only there were DNA, and I mean, they wouldn't have known to keep it.
I think they still have the fingerprints. It's just those fingerprints were never linked to
I mean,
anybody ever.
they're dead and gone now. But the just hair fibers or something, it's like they just probably didn't even know to look for that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a bummer. Well, great story. I spent the whole time squinting at you like, what's happening? Just waiting for the story to be over. But it just got weirder.
Yeah.
Like it didn't end at him dying. That's
And another thing that's weird is he gave this LA address and he had never been to LA.
like, what was he up to?
He was from Alabama.
What was he up to? Again, who goes to a hotel for multiple days with a toothbrush and a comb? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening? What's happening in your life that you're like, you have no clothes and you're going to stay multiple days? Like, that's not normal.
Well, and to me, it was weird that the librarian got that call. The caller specifically said whatever was in the box was direct proof that this elderly person had committed the murder, but then either didn't tell the librarian the name or the librarian never gave up the name, which is even weirder. Maybe it's because he's dead. I don't know. Librarian never gave it up. But anyways, that's my story. It's unsolved. If you know what happened to Artemus, a.k.a. Ronald, a.k.a. Eugene, I'm sure they would like to solve this case.
From Alabama, LA,
Egypt,
Chicago, whatever, wherever he was. Man, what a I'm going to be thinking about this one. This one, the wizard and I are going to discuss it, and we'll let you know when we solve it.
The theories never made sense because, again, it was like the mafia or this cheating thing where like he cheated on some woman and she was scorned and whatever, but like there's no proof of that. He was like a 19-year-old traveling around. He didn't have a girlfriend, so like who could he be cheated on?
What if he knew?
But the thing is, he was not in his home state, right? So whoever found him had to have been, in my mind, had to have been following him, which is why he was using the fake names, because they knew his mother and they knew to write her. They knew that this man was writing letters home to his mom. They knew her address.
That's why I feel like it's maybe his uncle or something,
Yeah, because this is 1935. There's not Google where you can just find someone's address.
That's
so
what I'm
it
saying.
had to have been personal to me.
And then I'm doing this for my sister.
Right.
Like, that's what makes me feel like there's some connection to mom.
But the sister's name was Louise, not Ruby, supposedly.
What if the person was like Lou? I don't know. But I don't know. I'm making things up now. But I feel like Ruby was a big part of whatever happened after. Like, the idea that he was still alive seemed to be either some like fucked up like sadistic shit, like, haha, I'm going to make her think her son's alive. It's just like enough. But then why bother paying for burial and a service or whatever, like, and send flowers? Like, that all doesn't make sense. If it was somebody like going for a hit, like to, the mob wouldn't send flowers and pay for your burial.
What was weird to me is the mom was receiving these letters and these weird phone calls and didn't think about reporting her son missing. Like, she knew in her gut those letters were not him because she knew he didn't know how to type. And then this weird phone call, and she hadn't heard from him, and he's just out there traveling around.
I guess you don't want to believe that something could have,
But would you not want to know, just like, even just a wellness thing, like to know that he's alive and well? I don't know. I don't have children, so.
Go have fun. No, but it's a different time. Communication was a bit harder because if you didn't get a letter, you may not get a phone call because of the expense of it. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, she probably was like, well, he's on the road. He's a kid. Boys will be boys. I don't, who knows what she was thinking. But yeah, like, where do you begin with a missing persons report for a person who's traveling, like, on the road, and you have no idea where they are? They could be anywhere. So where do you start? Where do you like, hi, New York City police? I'd like.
There was some more stuff that happened that was really weird, but I just felt like the story would go on. But like, shortly after he died, this man came to the police department and identified the body supposedly as his cousin. And like, this woman that was like with him, like, basically confirmed, but then said, no, that's not our cousin. Our cousin died 5 years earlier. And then they just left the police department. There was like,
wait, so nobody identified him?
Not until years later when his mother saw his picture and like a story about his case. That was like,
so he was John Doe until years later.
Yeah, like they didn't realize his name. Yeah, people were claiming, right? Because then after the couple went in and claimed that it was their cousin or whatever, then there was like a couple of weeks.
What if it was the couple?
A couple of weeks into the investigation, there was like a wrestler, like promoter or recruiter who claimed someone matching that description had come and tried to be a wrestler, but was going under a totally different name. Cecile Warner was the name he said that the guy had given him.
Warner.
Yeah, Cecil Warner. And that was in the beginning of December of 1934.
Interesting story.
Yeah,
there's
but
so many twists and turns.
Yeah, but he didn't hire him. He like tried to refer him to someone else. But I mean, that went nowhere because they couldn't prove if that was true or not. Like, they had no proof that, if this guy was just trying to be part of the story, or if Ronald was really this person, why he would give another fake name. Anyway, so there was just a lot of leads.
Were the notes still in the room?
There was only that one note that said,
Dawn, wait.
I'll be back. But yeah, there was lots of these weird leads about who this man was until years later when his mom saw the story and finally was like able to prove that was her son. Like, she explained how he got the scar, like she had letters, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I just cut out because there was just so many weird side things that happened with people trying to identify, and just, it was crazy.
This is truly just a bizarre tale.
Yeah.
Like, really, just because there's so many players and so many missed opportunities to save that man's life.
Yeah.
Over his own missed opportunities as well as everybody else's.
Yeah, you know how I told you originally he was going to have the pauper's funeral or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, that had been published, which is why the man called to pay for the funeral. He saw that this case was going to be paid, whatever. The newspaper that had ran that story got a phone call from a woman who said that they had printed incorrect information because the man had actually been given a formal funeral, and she said that the funeral home and the flower shop could verify this if the paper would call them. And when they asked her to identify herself, she said, "Never mind, I don't know what I'm talking about," and then hung up the phone. So that's what I mean when I say, like,
so
when I say there's so many side stories to
the paper
Yeah.
printed that he was going to have a pauper's grave.
Yeah, that he had this pauper's grave funeral. This man called and said, "No, you need to bury him at this cemetery. I'm going to pay for it." Flowers arrived, the money arrived.
This was after the thing,
right.
And then a woman
called and said, "You guys misprinted. You need to call the funeral home and the flowers. Like, they can verify that this man had a proper formal funeral. He wasn't buried in an unknown grave." When they asked her to identify herself, she said, "Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about." The only other thing she said was he got himself into a jam, and never said anything else. Just hung up, didn't want to say who she was, didn't want to talk about it at all. So there are so many side pieces. Like, I'm going to have all of the resources in my notes, but there are just so many people who came about and said, "Oh, he was this person," or "He told me this was, whatever."
Wow.
So, again, I probably could have added like 45 more minutes, but there are just so many unanswered, so many bizarre things that just make zero sense. Nobody knows what he was doing, who he was running from. The whole librarian situation was fucking weird because, like, you just held on to that information for 9 years.
Why? And then why did that person not turn any of it in? Oh my God.
The theories, none of them made sense. That it was organized crime, that it could have been the mafia.
Obviously it wasn't. There was a shoebox full of shit.
Some people think the commercial woman was in on it, like, helped. But, I mean, why? Like, how would she know who he was? I mean, she was, whatever. But they say that she could have helped on it, that Dawn could have been involved. Like, there were so many theories. But there's zero evidence other than those fingerprints that were in the room that have never been identified. And then apparently the shoebox that now no one knows where it's at. So.
Lame. Well, great story. I'll have one next time. That's about all you get. That Christmas is coming up. I don't know when that is actually. Is that like next week, or is that I don't even know what day it is.
Today's the 10th.
Oh, okay. So we got a little while.
So next week we'll record, but the following week will be Christmas.
Yes.
And then the Tuesday after that is New Year's Eve.
And we won't be recording that either. So
we'll be back in the new year. Well, we'll be in it next week, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll be here next week, and then we will then see you in the new year. But yeah. So until next week, y'all. See something, say something, please.
For sure, because honestly.
Oh, Lord. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. All right. Bye.